Welcome to your chordal lesson of the week. Today I'm going to show you one of the most popular progressions for ambient guitar, and we are going to analyze why it works so well. So the progression sounds like this. You probably already heard that progression in a dozens of songs, and I'm going to tell you why it works so well because it utilizes two main music theory concepts that are very effective. The first one is relative chords, and the second one is secondary dominant. So let's start with the first one. What are relative chords? They are chords that share exactly the same scales and same notes. If I take the same progression that I've played, the first chord is B minor, and the third chord is D major. 1, 2, 3. So if I play a B minor scale, it sounds like this. And if I play the relative major, so the D major, and I play a D major scale, it sounds like this. So both B minor and D major share exactly the same 7 notes. The only thing that is different is the starting point of that scale. So if I were to play that scale, but without a definitive stop or end point to that scale, you wouldn't know if I'm playing in D major or B minor. And that's ambiguous. Now you know that I was playing a B minor scale because I stopped on the B note. But I could do the opposite. I could stop on the D note. And now you know that I am in D major just because of that stop at the D note here. So this progression plays a lot on that feeling of not knowing if you are in major or minor. And it's kind of the same thing that I showed you on my nostalgic chord tip to create your ambient guitar progressions. And ambient guitar plays a lot on that feeling of not knowing if we are in minor or major. And I find it's really interesting because you can feel the same exact songs in different ways. So the message or the emotion is not just inside the music, but it's in the interpretation of the listener. So when you hear that progression, you hear the first chord as B minor, so you say, oh, okay, it has to be a sad song, it's a minor song. But then you hear that chord that really wants to attract the D major. And when you hear the D major, you think, oh, maybe it's in D major because this chord really wanted to attract it. So by having so much emphasis on the D major, maybe it's a more hopeful and uplifting song. And when you go back on the B minor, you still have that feeling that it's sad and melancholic. So it's really playing a push and pull on the major and minor side of your chord progression. It really depends on the mood that you're in when you listen to this song. If you're in a good mood, you can perceive this song as uplifting, and if you're in a bad mood, you can perceive the song as melancholic. So it's very, very interesting to put the emotion and the message on the listener's side instead of having a very definitive emotion that you want to transmit through your song. And the second thing that is really effective on this chord progression is using secondary dominant chords. We will start by saying that a primary dominant chord is always built on the 5th note of a scale. So if I am in B minor, I have to find the 5th note of my scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that note is F sharp. So I have to build a major chord or a dominant 7 chord on that 5th degree here. So it does my primary dominant chord of my scale. And you hear that everywhere, especially since classical music and hundreds of years, you always hear that push and pull with the dominant chord. Especially at the end of the classical symphonic pieces. And the dominant chord really wants to attract the main chord of your scale, which is the 1st chord. So by having this, you want this note to resolve. And it's the same thing when you have a dominant structure. You have notes that want to resolve. So in a nutshell, this is what a dominant chord is. But the beauty is that you can create secondary dominant chords. So if you want to put more emphasis on a certain chord of your progression that it is not the 1st chord of your scale, you can create a secondary dominant chord. So let's say that I want to put more emphasis on the 4th chord of my scale, which is E minor in the case of B minor. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is the 4th chord of my B minor scale. I could play its own dominant chord to put more emphasis on it. So I could play E minor, dominant structure of E minor, and come back on it. And the dominant chord of that E minor is B major, so it's not part of the B minor scale. But it doesn't matter because you put more emphasis temporarily on the E minor. But after a while, you will come back on your primary dominant to come back on your definitive key of B minor. All of that is to say that in our, to come back to our initial progression, the 2nd chord that we play ends up being a secondary dominant. If we analyze the notes inside of that chord, it's a C sharp, A, and E. So if we reorder the notes, it does A major chord. And A major happens to be the dominant chord of D major. That's why the 2nd chord really wants to attract the D major chord. You want this note to and it works really well. This is just an inversion of A major chord. So it could work either way. We could play. This was the not inverted version, and this one is the inverted version. And they all equally work well. So by having the secondary dominant of the D major chord, it puts more emphasis on the D major chord, and it reinforces the feeling that maybe that now we are in a major scale. And when we come back on the B minor, oh, maybe now we are in a minor scale. And it pushes and pulls that way during the chord progression. And after that, on my first example at the beginning of the video, I have done this one. But I have played another sequence up there. You could analyze it as if we have changed keys for E minor, and that G major is the relative chord to E minor. Once again, they share the same scale. Exactly the same principle. They share the same scale. They are relative chords. So we could see that as if we had changed keys to E minor, but we could see the E minor as the 4th chord of the harmonization of our B minor. So this is the 4th chord. This is a secondary dominant of our 6th chord. And this is our 6th chord of the progression. So we could see that either way. The secondary dominant chords can be useful to attract any chord. You could play it for any chord of your progression like that. You could go on and on with that. If you want, I could do a whole lesson on dominant chords and go more in depth than just this example. So if you want to learn more, you can write in the description box and request for a secondary dominant lesson. So to recap, that's what makes this progression so effective, because of the constant push and pull and attraction to the major and minor relative chords. So there's an ambiguous feeling of not knowing in which exact minor or major mode we're at, and that's what makes the strength of that progression for ambient guitar, because the emotion is now on the listener's side to interpret. Thanks a lot for watching my lesson. If you're still not comfortable to create sequences and harmonize scale with chords like that, I really recommend to go take my free mini course on ambient guitar chords. It's the first link in the description box, and it's also the orange pick that you can click on here right now. It could help you a lot. Until next time, guys, take care and au revoir.